Hello and welcome friends. In today's video we will talk about some of the key failures of Canada's foreign policy in year 2020. We will go over the issues, how Canada responded and why it hurt the country's image, not just in Canada but also around the world. Let's get started. Earlier this year, Canada, with a lot of fanfare, started its campaign to win United Nations Security Council non-permanent seat at the United Nations. Both the Prime Minister of Justin Trudeau as well as Canada's Foreign Minister not only hosted a number of events, interviews, as well as press statements, but also pushed hard with other United Nations countries to garner support in their campaign. However, on June 17, 2020, Canada's campaign came to a halt. Canada failed to secure necessary 2/3 votes at the United Nations. Instead, Ireland and Norway were able to secure their United Nations Security Council seats, while Canada lost. In the end, Canada could only receive 108 votes, while Ireland and Norway they got 128 and 130 votes respectively. This is not the first time that the Canada had attempted to win the United Nations Security Council seat. The last time Canada tried was in 2010 under Stephen Harper's government. However, the loss this time was much steeper and Canada did worse than 10 years ago. In 2010, Stephen Harper's government was able to get 114 votes, much higher than this year. Canada's loss at the United Nations Security Council not only came as a shock to many Canadians, but also showed the failure of Canada's foreign policy. While deliberating on the reasons for Canada's loss, the Liberal government said that the campaign didn't get enough time to engage the participating countries. However, if you look, all the countries they get the same time to run their campaign, and if you look at from that perspective, that reasoning may not be very accurate. Some of the foreign policy experts noted that the major reason for Canada to lose the United Nations Security Council election was messaging. Canada was not able to define itself and what it stood for when it was engaging with other countries. Voting countries did not know what Canada aims to do at the United Nations Security Council, what were its objectives, and how supporting Canada would help overall all the countries at the United Nations or the supporting countries. The second reason that comes to mind is that while Canada is very active in the G7 with its dealing with the United States, United Kingdom, it has not traditionally engaged and invested into foreign relations with many democratic countries, whether it is in Asia or whether it is in Africa. Therefore, reaching out to them at the last minute to get their support for a United Nations Security Council was not very successful. On top of that, Canada spent more than $2 million on their United Nations Security Council campaign. Some critics going to the extent calling that Canada actually tried to buy itself into the United Nations Security Council but still failed to do so. So that was a major foreign policy debacle this year by Canada's Liberal government. Another very high-profile foreign policy challenge that Canada had this year was not able to secure the two Michaels from Chinese prisons in China. Michael Kovrig and Michael Spavor just completed 2 years in the Chinese prison without any hope in any near future for their safe and sound release. As you would know, the two Michaels were detained in China by Chinese officials on the charges of espionage 2 years ago. However, everybody knows that the actual reason for detaining the two Canadians were a direct retaliation by Chinese for Canada to arresting Huawei executive Meng Wanzhou on US government's request. Meng is CFO of the Chinese tech company Huawei and also the daughter of Huawei's owner and the founder. Meng's father is also a Chinese Communist Party member and has very strong political connections in Communist Party. Over the last 2 years, Canada has tried a variety of things to get the two Michaels released. It has engaged and raised the issues both internationally, nationally, as well as bilaterally with the Chinese, however, without any success. So one of the failures for Canada's foreign policy in this regard has been not being able to give a strong message to the Chinese regime as well as the Chinese Communist Party that release of two Michaels is really important for Canada. The fact that 2 years have gone by and Canada has not seen any progress in this matter shows the failure of the Canadian foreign policy. At the same time, the government of Canada is under increasing pressure to use more harsher actions against a Chinese official. One of those options on the table is freezing assets of Chinese officials and their finances in Canada. These options have been raised and talked about in the media for a long time. However, Canadian government and the foreign ministry has not been able to finalize these decisions, perhaps because of their fear that if they take any direct actions like sanctions, Chinese government may harm the two Michaels. However, on the other side, the critics of the Canadian foreign policy say that appeasing China for the last 2 years has not worked. Soft peddling of this issue for the last 2 years at the national and international level and even at the bilateral level has not worked. And the chances of this policy continuing will not yield but will further complicate the issue and embolden the Asian bully. Other major embarrassment for the Canada as a country as well as for its foreign policy has been kind of a self-goal by Justin Trudeau, who waded into a political farmers' protest going on in India a few weeks ago. While talking to some of his cabinet ministers, Justin Trudeau raised the farmers' protest going on in India and supported it. The reaction from India was sharp and swift. India almost accused Canada and Justin Trudeau to be encouraging extremist activities. Canadian ambassador to India was summoned by India's Ministry of External Affairs and warned of harm to the bilateral relations if Canadian politicians did not stop and restrain themselves. To take a step further to show Canada India's disappointment, India's Foreign Minister Jaishankar boycotted Canada-led global meeting of 21 countries on COVID-19. India has been a very active and positive player in the times of this pandemic, and India has been supporting a lot of countries with who are battling currently with COVID-19 by supplying them COVID-related medicines, as well as India is a global hub that is producing the COVID-19 vaccine for the global supply. While at one hand, Canadian politicians like Justin Trudeau, Jagmeet Singh, and some of the other Liberal ministers have been supporting farmers' protest in India against the farm bills, Canada's its own behavior has been completely opposite and hypocritical. This year, India passed a farms bill in India that provides Indian farmers an opportunity to get higher prices for their produce, sell their goods in more markets than currently they can, as well as be able to reform their farming practices by diversifying their crops, as well as incentives to work with private players in terms of contract farming. At the same time, they have the luxury and protection of getting minimum support price or MSP if they sell it directly to the government as currently. However, Canada has been a vocal opponent of India at international bodies like World Trade Organization, where it has condemned India's practice of providing Indian farmer minimum support prices. Even earlier this year, Canada worked with USA to raise an issue at the World Trade Organization. There you can see a hypocrisy, and Canada was rightly called so by a lot of Indian media as well as Indian politicians of its double speak on this matter. Given the reaction from India, it is very possible that the trade relations between Canada and India in coming months and years will deteriorate. Today, India is the 10th largest trade partner of Canada as per 2019 data. The bilateral trade between Canada and India currently is around $10 to $11 billion. Canadian exports of agriculture goods to India has been on a decline for several decades because of India's growing self-reliance in the agriculture sector. However, India is still a major market for Canadian agriculture and agri-food products, being the 5th largest importer of Canadian vegetables and raw agriculture produce. The Canadian exports to India of agriculture material runs into many billions of dollars on an annual basis. Once farm bills are implemented, Canada is expected to lose out much of this revenue over a period of time. The bills are expected to provide farmers, that is Indian farmers, better market prices and incentives to diversify their crops beyond not just wheat and rice, but to other areas as well. Thus, it will narrow the gap of pulses and lentil production and demand in the country coming years. India is also expected to take direct actions to retaliate against Canada for meddling in its internal affairs. That opens the door to reduce buying Canadian products, including milk, grains, and lentils, and that would likely hit Canadian farmers directly. And all of that could have been avoided if Canadian politicians, as well as just Prime Minister Justin Trudeau, could have restrained himself. And if you look at other level, India is the largest democracy on the face of the planet. Canada itself is a democratic country, and it is expected that the two democratic countries will respect each other and will not talk about each other's internal matters at the global platform. And looking at India's history, India has never ever meddled into Canadian internal politics. India has never commented about racism issues with indigenous people. India earlier this year has also not talked about a number of protests on Black Lives Matters or rioting or other events that were happening in Canada. Therefore, it came as a surprise for many Indians, not only in India but also in Canada, when Justin Trudeau commented about kind of directly interfering into internal affairs of India. So these were my 3 top foreign policy disasters of Canada this year. Overall, if one has to summarize the current foreign policy of Canada, you can easily see the disarray and lack of direction. While pandemic has made foreign diplomacy much harder these days, it seems Canada has itself to blame for some of the major disaster that put itself into this year. What do you think about Canada's foreign policy principles and its goal? Do you think Canada needs to tweak or create a framework for more effective foreign policy? Let us know your views in the comment box below.